Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this week's Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about the number of people that we have had reach out to us with advice on what to do for a very specific situation that seems to be getting more and more common. And that is that they work for an organization and either people around them have left or been part of layoffs. And now they find themselves still with their organization, and now they have slowly but surely accumulated more responsibility for things that used to be done by people who are no longer with the organization, but no one has ever sat down with them to say, hey, we love your performance. We would like to promote you. We would like to give you a raise, a promotion, a better title, anything like that. It's just kind of, they found themselves having to get done more work. And in some situations, the entire job of someone else that is no longer there. In other situations, mostly it's kind of like part of somebody else's job when they've left. And some people just are having a difficult time with this.
Yeah, or the conversation around like, hey, we're all going to have to do more, right? Simply that conversation.
Just simply that conversation,
right?
Yeah.
Not even so much about assigning.
If we ignore it, it will go away.
Exactly. Let's pretend that we have to do the same work with less people.
Right.
like everything's fine. It's interesting that we've seen a lot of this coming up recently. And it makes sense based upon what we're also seeing kind of across different industries and changes to organizations and things like that. And as a leader, I think, and I can only speak from my experience and my background, like some of this comes with the territory. Sometimes these are opportunities. Sometimes you're going to have people in and out of the business, or maybe a role that you've had like no longer exists, and then that kind of is like that responsibility is peanut buttered across multiple people, and then maybe a year from now the role comes back. Like who knows? But like I've experienced that in regards to just like it being a thing that happens specifically in the retail industry, especially when you have ebb and flows from high traffic demand times during holidays to other times of the year when you don't need so many employees. So that I think happens in certain industries and spaces. I think the bigger question here that people are asking about is like, how do you approach the conversation, or what do you say, or how do you go about talking about this fact when there's not a proactive element to the dialogue and the conversation. And I think that's something that we could probably unpack a little bit.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a leadership podcast. And so the goal here is from the responsibility of you as a leader. What is your responsibility to do? And so I think if ideally the responsibility falls on the leader to at least have the conversation, right? To not just ignore the elephant in the room in the hopes it goes away, or that your employees will just kind of not realize they've been asked to pick up the slack of people who have left the organization, but instead have the conversation with them and let them know what's going on. It might help to say what else you've taken on as their leader. Like the people who have left, the people who've been laid off, they're not just people that are your peers, they're my peers also. And so everybody is doing more than what we did in the past. I'm sorry that's the case. I'm sorry that's happening right now. It's not fun to have to all of a sudden take on the responsibilities of someone else who has left with the same amount of resources, with the same paycheck size, and you either have to work more quickly or work longer hours in order to get that work done, and that might be the case across the board. Or at the very least, say, this is not going to work. Like if this isn't going to work for an employee, it gives them the opportunity to kind of say that it's not going to work. And that might mean that they are not a fit for the organization anymore. Or it might mean that you can at least be clear around what the long-term plans are. Because it's one thing to say to an employee, hey, I need you to pick up this particular thing for the next 60 days because we have an open position and we're hiring for it. And if you'd like to apply for it, you can. If you want to talk to me about whether or not you're a fit for this role, then you can. But we are hiring for this role right now. And in the next 60 days, I need you to do this and this. But that responsibility will not fall on you forever. It's a temporary thing. If it's not a temporary thing, or if you don't know whether it is because it's just kind of open-ended, then you need to be clear about that too. Because it's not fair to the employee to just wonder whether or not they're going to be doing this additional work going forward without knowing whether or not something else is going to come along with it. In a tighter job market, or in a market where the employers have a little bit more power than the employees are less likely to vocalize that this is an issue. Some still will, but some will not because they don't want to make waves. They're worried about being part of the next round of layoffs. And so they just want to buckle down and get their work done. But it will lead to a lack of engagement and a lack of productivity if you don't have the conversations. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is I want to know about a time when you found yourself having to do work that was technically not your job to do. And you didn't really know how long it was going to be for or what the parameters were around it, but you just had to do it, and how you kind of navigated those waters when having those conversations. So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give that forward for one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, have you ever had to take on more responsibility, not even being formally asked to do it or being given any parameters around how long it was going to be, but you just kind of like woke up one morning and said, wait a minute, I've been doing this for the last few weeks and I don't even know how it got on me, and kind of figuring out how to navigate those waters with your boss?
I've definitely experienced the expectation or the assumption that everybody would just take on the responsibility as a result of something that's happening. I remember very clearly being an assistant manager with multiple peers and then having one leave, one was like on vacation, one ended up taking like a leave of absence, and then all of a sudden this team of assistant managers was down to a very few amount, about half of what you normally would have.
Sure.
And so like the schedules kept on getting put out, but instead of having like this overlay of leadership coverage, it was kind of like one of us would open, one of us would work a mid, one of us would close. And then it was so like it kind of got spread out and it was out there. But then there were all these things that had to happen based upon when you were working. And for most of my career, I've always landed myself in some type of a sales manager type job, which means usually you work during hours of operation. And so some of the administrative work, some of the kind of the backstage inventory work was not something that I did on the daily, but something that I was around and that I saw. And then what I found out was very quickly was like, okay, cool, I'm going to close this time instead of maybe work a mid. And then having supervisors being like, so what are we doing with this, or how's the process? And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? So like what I felt was this lack of leadership from our leaders saying, hey, here's what's going on. Here's the adjustments that we're making. Who feels comfortable in these types of shifts? I'm aware that some of these leaders are not only assistant managers, but they're subject matter experts in certain parts of our business. And therefore, some of you may not have done this, or you've never done this before. What can we do to make sure that we do this? So there was no proactive approach or strategy to solve for any of that. It was just kind of okay. Like, I guess these reasons people are out of the business, so just like spread out the schedule and then the managers will figure it out type of thing.
Yeah.
And it was tough. It was tough because, it was like there was a need for a conversation. And then it was like, well, who's going to have that conversation? And then do you feel like you're saying, hey, I don't know how to do this, or hey, I don't want to do this? Like all of those types of kind of emotions creep up, and that makes it difficult.
How did it come to a head? Like, did somebody actually finally say something, or did it just you just kind of like close your eyes and hope you got through it okay, and then eventually some of those people came back to work?
One of the managers that was working in the morning completely did not do something that is supposed to be done every single day.
Right.
And so by the time that our manager came in, they had a lot of questions about that and saying like, I don't understand. And finally that person was like, well, I don't know either because I didn't even know I had to do it. And then that turned into like, well, what do you mean you didn't know? And so then this conversation happened where all of us then said like, yeah, like we've basically just been trying to figure this out and wing it.
Right.
And then the conversation was like, well, why didn't you say anything? And then we said, well, why didn't you say anything?
Yeah.
Like, so it was a little bit of a back and forth, maybe a learning moment for all sides. Some of us took the learning moment and applied it to our future careers.
Yep.
Others placed blame and moved on.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, if the expectation was that everybody knows how to do everybody's job, then the responsibility falls on you as the team to say, hey, you know what? I know we were supposed to know how to do this stuff, but we don't. If that's not the responsibility, though, then the responsibility falls on your leadership to be able to say, hey, I know this isn't something you normally do. These are the things that you have to get done that I know you've never done at all because of the way that we silo these roles. and I know that will make it harder, but whatever you don't feel comfortable doing, let me help. What can I do? Can I come help you? Can we get some people to substitute in from other locations or other places to kind of help during the meantime? Like, there are ways around it. It's this whole, when everybody just kind of doesn't have the conversation because they're waiting for someone else to speak first. That only works if someone actually does speak first. If no one's going to speak, that's going to cause a problem. And this works whether you're talking about teams of people or individuals. And this is what we're talking about here. If you are an employee who has found yourself doing more work than you would normally do because of departures from the organization, you have to make a decision as to whether or not this is okay with you. If it is okay, then don't let it get you down and keep moving forward and be happy you have the job, I guess. If it is something that's going to get to you, then you have to have the conversation with your boss. And you might not have great answers to that conversation, but you as a leader, if you're a leader now and someone comes to you with these conversations, you at the very least owe that person complete transparency. Either whether or not the role is planning on being filled, and if so, how long it will take, what the expectation is of everybody around in terms of more responsibility. You as a leader, are you taking on more responsibility? The more transparent you can be, the more that your employees will be able to leave these conversations at least feeling, I don't know about like great about what's going on, but better than not knowing anything. And when it comes to that communication, that is 100% on you as the leader to not just assume it's happening and to take that responsibility on yourself and make it happen.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.